All of humanity shares a common first language. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, no, my first language is English or Spanish or Vietnamese. But actually, the first language you learned how to leverage was your body language, also called nonverbal communication. So think about this. Before you knew how to say, I want that, you learned how to point and to smile. And then as we got older, we started to not only use our nonverbal communication, we learned how to use language to enhance or complement the nonverbal communication that we started with. But here's the crazy thing. As you kept getting older, all people start to focus so much on the gift of words that sometimes we confuse communication with just talking. When you look at the studies, communication is so much more than just what we say. In fact, most researchers agree that more than 70% of your communication is done non-verbally. Some go as far to say as 93%, but everyone agrees it's the majority of your communication. And you could be saying, how is that possible? I don't use my nonverbal communication. I'm very careful what I say. When I write emails, I pick word choices great, but I don't ever use nonverbal communication. How could it make up the majority of my communication? Well, here's just a brief example. Let's say I were to see you in the hallway, and as soon as I see you, I say, oh my goodness, it's so good to see you. Well, I communicated something. And you would say, yeah, but Jared, you used words. You said it's so good to see you. Now let's pretend that I use those same words, like they're really specifically chosen. I'm very thoughtful about what I say. But watch what it looks like as I change my nonverbals. Oh my goodness, it's so good to see you. Now, I could mean it, right? I could really mean I'm happy to see you. But was that the message that was communicated? No, of course not. And that's a very dramatic example, but we can see how when you change your nonverbals, it changes the message that is received. This is why studying nonverbal communication is so important, but often so overlooked. A lot of times people forget just how common and how practically applied nonverbal communication is, whether they're intentional about it or not. Because here's the other crazy thing. You cannot not communicate. You are always communicating something non-verbally. Even if, like my craziest example, let's say, okay, I'm really not going to communicate. I'm going to close my eyes, I'm going to hold my breath, and I'm not going to communicate anything. Well, you're communicating something, right? You're communicating, one, that you're trying not to communicate. And if someone were to walk by, they'd be like, is everything okay? Because you're putting something out there that's being received and interpreted by others. So, because nonverbal communication is so primal, it's the very first thing that we learned how to communicate with, and we share that with all of humanity. And because you can never not communicate, right? You're always communicating something. Then this is something we really need to zoom in on and say, because it's so common and yet often overlooked, if we want to be great leaders, we need to really examine, focus, and figure out how can we practically apply and use communication in the nonverbal form to elevate, encourage, and connect us with others. And so in this series, we're going to look at 7 nonverbal communication styles, and then we're going to really practically say, how do we use this to build a rapport, to increase our relational capital with others, and ultimately connect with the people around us?